All right, we'd like to welcome you back to the Trampled Underfoot podcast show. These are your hosts, Mark Lindsay and I, Eloy Escajedo, coming at you from our secure locations, underground bunkers across the country. And how are you all doing?
I am hunkered down, bunkered down, and ready to rock and roll.
Heck yeah.
I mean, you gotta patrol the parapet every once in a while, make sure that the site is secure. Once it is, you're all set. I mean, you never know when you're going to get up in the middle of the night and find somebody sleeping in a recliner. So
That's right.
you got to be prepared, like the Boy Scouts say.
Yeah, if you want to hear a good story and you're running across this now, after you listen to this episode, you should go check out that one where Mark explains a little scenario that occurred um, where they woke up to a stranger in their house. We won't say more, but
I don't remember which number it was, but the episode title was Things That Go Drunk in the Night.
and that should inform you all of what might, at least partially, what could have happened. If you're,
Yeah.
if you try to put two and two together, you might start to form a hypothesis.
But don't assume. Wait
But
for
don't
it.
assume.
Wait for it.
So what's going on?
Well, I'm sure if you've looked at Facebook, yeah, much at all today, you've probably seen a meme pop up
Mhm.
talking about a guy by the name of Willis Carrier who invented the first electrical air conditioning unit in 1902.
I saw one or two posts about him.
Yeah, and hallowed forever be his name because Saint Willis, the patron saint of air conditioning. I mean, God bless the man because that is one of those inventions that I know I could not live without. And you being where you are,
Hmm.
I seriously doubt 3/4 of the population of Miami would be there without air conditioning.
They probably wouldn't have paved so many roads and parking lots the way they have.
For sure, for
Well, the
sure.
reason I say that is because I don't know if it happens out west, but whenever you have concrete or asphalt or whatever, the temperatures
Yeah.
reflect and it's much hotter. Like out in the boondocks,
Mhm.
yes, it's hot, but you just sit under a tree or something and the ground you're not getting that reflective. It's different.
It is completely different, absolutely, and that's why in big cities, parks. That's why the parks are so popular during the
Yeah.
summertime. Is because, well, usually at night they've watered the grass and what have you, so you got a little bit of moisture in the ground there, and maybe the air temperature isn't that much cooler,
Yeah.
but the closer you get to the ground, you know, you've got you've got it is much cooler. You don't have that reflected heat like you're talking about.
Yeah.
So that is a very real thing,
Hmm.
believe me. Yeah. Steve is saying you may have to learn to live without AC so they can power their electric cars. Yeah. Well, that's all. That's the price they got to pay because, I will not give up my AC.
Well, I walked the other day to the supermarket. That's right. Um, I walked to the supermarket, and well, I did so because I wanted to do the walk, but at the
Mhm.
same time, gas is expensive. But really, I wanted to do the walk, but at the same time, it served a double purpose.
Right.
And there's a lot of people on foot.
Yeah.
Obviously, the majority not, but
Mhm.
there's a truckload of people on foot.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was even one dude. Oh, I'll just say this one last thing. Using a bike, an older gentleman on a bike, and I said, you know what? There you go. I mean, it's not if it's only you and whatever. It's but there's too many scenarios where that's not applicable. But whatever.
Yeah. That's something that I've never asked you about. Have you ever been a fan of motorcycles at all?
Um, I've ridden um ATVs.
Hmm.
Um, and that's really about it. I've never rode a motorcycle, and I think that they're dangerous as hell.
Well, I think the motorcycle in and of itself is not dangerous as much as it is the person riding it and the people around you, because for some reason they just do not see you. I mean, I've had that experience a few times,
Yeah.
but I was kind of wondering, just as you were talking about the guy on the bicycle, I thought to myself, yeah, even that sounds like work. And then I thought, well, what about a motorcycle? I don't, and then that made me think, I don't think I've ever asked you about that. So you've never ridden a motorcycle on the street in traffic or anything
I've
like
I've been on a moped
that? Hmm.
down the highway, and then I've I've done um, quads.
Hmm. Okay. Well, now knowing traffic in your town where you are, let's say you had to go to the grocery store real quick, would you risk hopping on like a scooter and running
I
down
would
to the store?
I wouldn't feel safe.
No, you wouldn't.
I
Okay.
personally would not feel exposed like that.
Hmm.
Um, and the realization of, so look, the realization of people, and like I think in the past few years, I mean, I've always had that instinct, but in the past few years, how really, and I've mentioned it, how really dangerous other human beings are. I was, oh, that's something that, uh, well, I'll let you do your thing. There's a good thing there. I've realized how dangerous people are, so unpredictable.
Yeah.
I have a spinoff actually that might be interesting
Well,
if
yeah, because the reason, because they were all over Europe.
yeah,
Driving in Europe is very, very expensive because they're limited on space. They're limited on, well, first of all, where you're going to park the ding dong thing. Most houses don't have a garage. Most people live in high rises with no parking facilities or with very few parking facilities.
yeah,
But there are scooters everywhere, and they will devote entire corners of parking lots to nothing but scooters. And where you might park 15 or 16 cars, you can park, I mean, a whole truckload of scooters, and they are everywhere. They're cheap to own, they're cheap to buy. They have different licensing requirements for a scooter, and we're talking about something less than 50 cc. And I mean, people that would never think about owning a car or getting a driver's license for a car over there have scooters, and they use the heck out of them. I mean, saddlebags, and I mean, up to and including trailers for them.
yeah.
So it's wild. But okay, go ahead with what you were going to do. I was just wondering because I had never asked you about a motorcycle.
I feel that they're dangerous,
Mhm.
um, for my taste,
Yeah,
um, because of that. Um, it just, you know,
yeah.
I feel they're dangerous. I think that they're I think that they're dangerous because you're exposed. Um,
Mm.
and you can be cautious, but like you said,
Yeah.
the people around you.
Well, most accidents on motorcycles involve another vehicle. And the last time I did a paper on this, it was like 86% of accidents between a motorcycle and a car or truck was the other driver turning left in front of the motorcycle because they just don't see you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you do have to be careful. I mean, you have to be on the defensive at all times, but there are things you can do to help kind of mitigate it. But
Um, if I can recall, oh, okay, I think I can.
just talking about people being dangerous.
People being dangerous. So recently, there's a few things. Recently, and you've probably heard about it. You guys out there have heard about it. They've been talking a lot about Google and major companies where they're in the process of working on AI, deep learning, uh, systems, robots, artificial intelligence, and I've seen a couple of bits out there recently where they talk about all the wonders of what it could mean They learn faster than humans. They collect all this information and stuff, and then they put it in a shell. Like they stuffed that Commodore 64, for all intents and purposes, into a plastic, rubber shells to make it look human. And then the question has been in some of these videos, um, what do they have consciousness, or are they reaching a type of consciousness? And then the implications unfold into, and they make a lot of comments about this and that, but um, if they become so intelligent, um, they could calculate things without us necessarily knowing, and then start to make decisions based on the calculations they've made. They could figure eventually on that we're not humans, organic, are not useful anymore. I mean, they've been making all sorts of different things, fingers and stuff, um, and so the people in the comments, the fear is that oh, this sounds, because it's apocalyptic.
Yeah.
The way they're describing the possible dangers of it, and then just to finish off and see what you think, I left a comment saying exactly what I just said, that these are basically glorified Commodore 64s stuffed into a sort of, clown suit to simulate, um, you know, a human being. And then I finished off the sentence. I don't know why I bothered, but I felt like I wanted to say it. And I said, by far, the most dangerous uh, thing I can think of is a human being today, right now, and for the past unspeakable history. Man is the ultimate killing machine by far. And that was my statement. And whereas a lot of people were saying, the machines, they're going to eventually get us, the machines eventually this and that, if they get too intelligent, what if they do this, what if they do that? And so, but I don't have that view. I think that something like that is possible, but
Uh,
not really. I
I
think that
was
humans are too dangerous. Go
I
ahead.
was kind of looking off to the side a little bit because as you were talking and describing this, there was either a book, a movie, or both with that as its plot. That the computers and the AI had decided that humans were just not a viable creature anymore and therefore had to be eliminated.
Yeah.
We were more destructive than useful and just no longer necessary. And I cannot remember the name. And this is my memory just flat out failing me. It was either a book, a movie, or both. And I don't remember where I read it or watched it or both. But that was the premise of the book. The thing about it is, and the thing that a lot of people forget about is whether we think or even they think they have a consciousness or not, they have no rights under law. So it would not be a crime, for example, to just blow one up. Yeah, it's destroying somebody else's property, but they have no rights in law. So if it came to that, do you think an entire civilization is just going to go quietly into the night? I don't think so.
No.
I mean,
At
it'd be
all.
it'd be sledgehammers on sale at Home Depot, three for $1, and let's go out and have some fun.
But the scenario that they give,
Mm-hmm.
um, there is something there for one were to sit through what their what the capabilities are
Mm-hmm.
going on. If it becomes a situation where these things are helpful for us, in current time,
Mm-hmm.
where they start to be implemented everywhere and we become dependent on them because it's a benefit to us, but at the same time, their calculations, and I guess you'd say whatever that might mean as far as autonomy to calculate, and maybe amongst themselves, it, unbeknownst to us, as they have hold on different parts of society because they're the machines that are helping us,
Mm-hmm.
and then they decide to do a plot, um, and they have controls and finances, like, because imagine they would replace key areas little by little, like automation does
Well,
now.
yeah, we already have in a lot of ways,
Yeah,
but we also know to put in manual overrides and fail safes to take that power away. So let's say the power grid that's run by computers now, and it directs power in one direction or another based on demand and based on output and all this other good stuff. But there is still always manual override where somebody can flip that switch, shut them completely out of the loop, and run it manually
yeah,
because systems break down. I mean, things just happen, systems do break down. And there has to be a way to manually override to keep the system running or shut the system down if something doesn't react the way it's supposed to. So, I mean, so long as we keep that in place, it's kind of like the driverless vehicle. All of them except for Google's driverless car did not even have a steering wheel or brake pedal. And that was its failure right there. There has to be a way to manually override that system because it can't account for anything or for everything, excuse me. Yeah.
yeah,
It
yeah,
might have the sensors in the front of it to see, okay, a kid kicked a ball out in the middle of the road and the kid ran out to grab it. It may have the sensors to be able to slam on the brakes, but it can't control a runaway truck coming at you from the side. You know, it can't it can only control itself. It can't control the things around and the ability to react. I don't know. I mean, there has to be a manual override somewhere in there.
yeah.
And that was another weird one on that Google car. It looked like a bubble with four wheels, but there were no controls in it at all. But it still had rear view mirrors, and I don't know why. Because if you can't drive it, what do you care what's behind you?
Right.
It's not like you're telling it when to change lanes.
There were a few movies. I think Terminator was one where the robots, the machines. There was
Mhm.
Matrix, where the machines, robots take over. There's a few sci-fi
Yeah.
in popular culture
Mhm.
about that sort of thing, but um,
And
number one, I don't, I can't, I don't want to be that person necessarily that tries to predict the future because I'm so darn sure that it won't happen. But from my vantage point now, at least, um, I don't, you know, I
well,
don't, I don't see it
we
necessarily.
have set the precedent on becoming so reliant on technology and machines to do things for us that we're unsure what to do without them. I mean, look, just something as simple and stupid as what do you do when the power goes out?
Just
There's
sit there
no
and wait.
internet, there's no television, the power's just gone. What do you do? Now, personally, we pick up books or we go outside and walk around the yard or go out and do something like that.
Well, yeah, you keep busy until the
But
lights come
yeah,
back on.
but I mean, look at how much of our entertainment relies on that power. I
Yeah.
mean, so we have become so reliant on that technology that we have no idea what the hell to do when we don't have it available to us.
Well, because we have a system that we're accustomed to, but
Mhm.
people in the 1800s, um,
Well, they didn't know any better.
they didn't have that option, so they, I mean,
Mhm.
worked.
Yeah.
They read, you
Uh-huh. They
know,
played cards, they told stories. I mean,
games.
hmm
I mean,
welcome
because
visitors.
yeah, had a lot of babies. I mean,
Well, that's true too.
because I mean they didn't have that, but we have that option.
Hmm.
The more options that we have, I mean, we're used to it. If you were to, but
Yeah.
I think that eventually, if you had to, you'd eventually learn to live without.
Well, you would be forced to when you
Yeah,
have no alternative. You know,
yeah.
I
I
mean,
mean,
look at what lockdown did to us. We had people that couldn't get their chicken McNuggets anymore, trying to figure out how to cook the thing. You know,
yeah,
asking the next guy over in line at the staying a comfortable 6 feet apart. How do I cook this? It's like, dude, Google
a,
is your friend. Well,
a
yeah.
lot of the stores that used, or at least like Walmart, we had at least back a few years ago. Let me see. I'll tell you. One, two, three. We had about four yeah, about four in this area,
Uh-huh.
broadly speaking, in the area, Walmarts that were open 24/7.
Yeah.
Literally,
Yeah.
you could, in the middle of the night, get up, get in your car, drive to Walmart and shop when there was barely people there and this and that. After, now there's a reduced,
Mhm.
um like everything is like that now.
I think they've done that countrywide, except for a few locations, because even our Walmart here in the little podunk town 3 miles away from us, it was open 24/7 as well.
Mhm.
And about a year before COVID hit, they started closing at 11 o'clock and they opened at 6 in the morning.
Yeah,
So that was before everything happened. It just, they weren't making enough money to, it didn't warrant it. I mean,
yeah,
we're talking about a town even smaller than the one I live in. The town I live in, depending upon if you listen to the federal or the state, is anywhere between 8,900 people and 8,500 people. Well, the town where Walmart is even smaller than that. They just weren't making any money staying open that late. It was
yeah.
nobody but employees anyway. So why keep the doors open? Why have a register open? Why have to worry about security and somebody running in, grabbing something and running back out? Just close the store.
If they did have the money,
Mhm.
or if the money was coming in, they wouldn't have closed it probably.
Right, exactly. And that's the way they put it, because none of our Walmarts are open after. I think there's one in Medford that stays open till midnight, but all of them close down overnight and then open at 6 the next morning.
Yeah. So
So
a few shifts there in the way,
yeah,
operating hours and whatnot, among other things. But whatever. Just tying in with the machine
yeah.
thing, or consciousness thing.
Mhm.
A lot of people say, they ask the question, well, what is consciousness and stuff, and they say if it's just collecting, having information and being able to bring it up and examine something and this and that. But you know because they argue that the brain, I mean, what we're doing is we have knowledge
Mhm.
stored in our hard drive,
Mhm.
and of the things that we've acquired in our life experience, and we put them to task when we need them, but we don't know, um, for certain things. It's a complicated thing because we the decision making part of the human mind,
Mhm.
um the subconscious part of the randomness, or the apparent randomness that we have, um where we can make a decision that we know is bad and not optimal, but we do it anyways. All that complication of human beings, to consider that as far as a computer. I mean, a computer can make errors,
Well, sure, but
but
they're missing a couple of very key components as far as I'm concerned, and this is just my opinion. based on the information that you've said, because I haven't really dug a whole lot into it. But just based on what you have said, there are two components that they're not taking into account. One is emotion, the other is environment, and rapidly changing circumstances, because you will react different ways based on your environment. If you are by yourself, you will act one way. If you're standing in the middle of the supermarket, you'll act a different way. If you're standing in a group of strangers, you'll act one way. If you're standing with a group of friends, you'll act another way. If it starts raining, you're going to react one way. If all of a sudden a hurricane's coming from out of nowhere, you're going to react a different way. All it can do is it can take in information from other sensors out in the ether or wherever they are, but it can take in and it can basically weigh it against previous experience or what has been programmed into it, but it can't make a decision on its own. It relies on those other sensors, just as though as we rely on our eyes and ears and our sense of touch and air temperature and things like that, but it's all self-contained. And then we ultimately make that decision. All it can do is search for the best outcome and go for it. There's no emotion involved. There's no our sense of individual morality involved, and there is no environmental input involved. And I think all of that needs to be added when you're talking about a consciousness.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, if you were to dig into the thing, and I agree with you, however, at the same time, if you were to dig in to see the things that these machines and what they're aiming for, they have the ability to smell and taste,
Okay.
which was, and the way they do it, according to what I saw as they were explaining it, the way they do it is that there's sensors in the finger. They can taste with their fingers,
Mm-hmm.
and and smell.
Mm-hmm.
And what it is that they have sensors that pick up on everything from heat detection to the content of the chemicals involved, like readings
Right.
like you would have with some sort of like meter that registers
Mm-hmm.
what the content of whatever. And so they're working on all that sort of thing, so they would have input as far as sensory
Mm-hmm.
in respect to that. And they had one where they had the robot or the advanced
AI.
AI. Uh, I got those. So much for the power of man and its and their mental power.
But see, that's the difference right there is our humanity sets us apart from the machines.
Right. See, I committed a tremendous error there. It could. I might add, it could mean the error from pressing the wrong button when you're in a space shuttle and it opens up the vacuum release and you
Yeah.
all. But that's the human aspect, like you're saying. We're liable to error
Mm-hmm.
and catastrophically, and
Sure.
yet um, we've teetered into the future by surviving generation after generation. So, but so they do have they do show a lot, but at
Sure.
the end of the day, like all the features that they're capable of or where they're aiming at. But at the end of the day, this idea of consciousness and stuff, because they make the argument, you know, it could be a primitive form or it could be a limited form of consciousness, but consciousness nonetheless. You know,
Yeah.
they argue that. I personally don't know the field enough to say, but
You and me both.
by any stretch of the imagination. But I think if I had to guess, I would put it all on the abstract subconscious nature that encompasses human experience, where you know many of the things I'm doing are subconscious
Sure.
without me knowing. that tug me one way or the other, depending on who knows how many different factors.
Yeah.
Um, that aren't beneficial always.
Right. Right.
If they can input that into a computer, then I would say that that computer, you'll see they
Well,
probably see them at a bordello somewhere with a reefer in their mouth and a whiskey in their hand. Because not every human is going to prefer optimization.
well, no, and in fact, we don't. Do you remember that? Do you remember that video I sent you? That guy Alex from the channel's called The Wings of Pegasus,
Yeah,
and it was talking about auto tune
yeah,
and how if you can't find an emotional connection with the music today, this is probably why.
yeah.
And they went uh, everything made before 1998 is easier to get an emotional connection with than anything made after 1998 because of auto tune,
Right.
because it basically stripped all the humanity out of music. And that's kind of sort of along the same lines, I think, of what you're talking about. When you strip away the humanity and everything is just a mathematical calculation, what are you left with? You know, when you're left with only logic based on math, there are so many things that are missing from it. You
Well,
know,
there's so many things that are missing according to us and how we exist, which is a large part of it is unknown. A large part of what we like. How come you're doing CNC? You can explain it away,
mm-hmm.
but even though, as an example, right, I could say
Yeah.
me with music or genealogy,
Mm-hmm.
you can have a ready set answer for that question. Well, why is Mark Lindsay
Mm-hmm.
doing CNC as opposed to, I don't know, acrylic abstract painting?
Yeah.
Um, and you would have a set of answers to that according to
Mm-hmm.
your experience. But then you have this whole other stuff that's in there churning, that's called the subconscious, because that does occur in our experience, that you can't explain away in a neat.
No, you're absolutely right. And that maybe that's where I was going when I was talking about emotion is not
Right.
a part of this, because you could design the best AI in the world, but is that AI capable of making a decision on what it thinks it's interesting and what it's going to focus on? Say, you have decided that genealogy right now is your interest and you're going to focus on it and you're going to document the history of your family. Could you develop an AI with all the information in the world out there? Could you develop an AI that will decide itself that it wants to study the Mariana Trench?
Right.
You know, it's going to do what it's told. And I think therein lies the difference between a consciousness and the ability to recall facts at the speed of light.
The interpretation, or the imperfect,
Mm-hmm.
the human interpretation, imperfect interpretation of the world around them,
Mm-hmm.
that sometimes hits the mark,
Mm-hmm.
many times not, is a random, imperfect thing that those computers cannot. Um,
Right.
or I'm assuming they can,
Well,
because that variable of randomness in humans is
but
how do you account for that? How does the
yes,
computer?
yes, and the ability to make a decision on what it is interested in. They have AI technology that will blow your mind when it comes to taking old video footage, colorizing it, remastering at 60 frames per second, and it fills in frames that do not exist. They just
Yeah.
don't exist. And it will stabilize that at 60 frames per second and colorize everything and just be absolutely gorgeous. But that AI was developed to do that one particular task. If you ask it to troubleshoot what's wrong with your 2006 Chevy, it ain't going to know what a 2006 is, what a Chevy is, or what troubleshoot is because it wasn't designed to do that. So I think AI created for a specific task can be, can open up new worlds. But whether that means it's a consciousness or not, I think is way, way open for debate.
Well, they don't. Nobody knows what consciousness is. It's an unknown. I mean, people say, it's in the brain, and it's the firing of, you know, synapses
Synapses and
in the
yeah,
brain, and but you could say that, and they do, and they study it,
well,
but you can't. It's unknown. It's not known.
well,
It's just not known. It's not known the function exactly. It's an ongoing thing.
well, it's also dependent upon your definition of consciousness and which definition of consciousness you're going for, because as you mentioned, the brain, the synapses in the brain, that's a biological definition of consciousness. If you want to get into more of a philosophical or a moral or a legal definition, I mean, you can go in several different directions all at once. So excuse me, to your point, I think you're right. You have to be able to define something before you know if something is something.
Yeah.
You can't call it something if you don't know what that something is. You know,
This idea of awareness, and the computer being aware. I mean, it's a difficult one. It's a difficult one, but they're working on
yeah,
that sort of thing. So,
yeah. I mean, and that's what it takes for any kind of a breakthrough in any field is somebody to work on something. I mean, so much of what we have today came about as a result of somebody working on something else entirely, and this was a side thing. I mean, the MRI machine for taking a look inside the body to try to figure out what's the matter with somebody, that came as a direct result of satellite technology, believe it or not. It was just getting into quantum physics and figuring this out and the other thing out, and they started playing around with trying to achieve one thing, and another thing was a result. And it's like, holy cow, if somebody wasn't trying to, you know, get into astrophysics, we wouldn't have an MRI. And it was all satellite technology that brought it about. You know, the microwave was discovered by somebody who had something in his pocket, like a chocolate bar in his pocket that melted when they were working on something completely different.
I'm gonna drop a link, if it's okay, to
Okay.
see if
Yeah, yeah.
Dan or anyone.
I forgot to do that. Yeah. See if Dan or Steve or Rick want to come along and join in. We're kind of in a subdued mood tonight. You know, it's hot. We're all going to kind of lay back and relax.
It is hot.
So, if you want to come hang over the fence with a glass of lemonade and shoot the breeze, I mean, we're cooling off. It's down to 102 right now. That's 39 Celsius for those of you who have to count it that way.
Currently, right now, where you're at,
Yeah, it's 102. Yeah, at
that
7 in the evening.
that is insane.
Our low tonight is going to be 71, and they're looking at 108 tomorrow, 109 Thursday. Then we're going to cool back down to 106 on Friday and Saturday. So, yeah.
Hey,
Dan, the man, the myth, the legend.
Been a little bit.
So, what's the good word?
Work. Lots
Work?
of work. It's always work. It's always work.
Yeah.
I'm always working. Here I am working. So,
Um, No, it wasn't during. You came up. You were a topic of discussion last night in my members only live stream, but I don't remember if it was during the live stream or after I was. I sent a bunch of people to your website.
Oh, okay, that explains.
You
I'm
were
getting all these IG likes like over the last 24 hours, 48 hours. And
Yeah, I bragged about your work and what have you. And there's one guy here, Rick French. He is he's one of my channel members, but I don't remember if it was the after show when me and the guys on the panel were BSing, or if I was talking about it during the live stream. I think it was the after show. So
Well, I'd like to I'd like to really congratulate Dan on this new, very clean. I mean, it's a smooth, modern yet rugged, yet it's appropriate. You could go to a dinner, or you could go to the woods and hack 5 to 6 people from here to Sunday. I mean, you cover the spectrum from formal to woodsman.
I was going for 1960s GI Joe action figure.
oh, okay.
That's where I was going with this. So
It took a bit for me to, I just saw Dan and I said it's Dan. But then as you guys were talking, I looked closer. I said, well, wait a second. And then, so
something's missing, like a foot of his face. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Dan had a beard that Billy Gibbons was going, damn, nice beard. I think Dan just wants to look like you, Eloy.
Oh yeah, I was 6 years deep on that thing too. So
oh man,
I cut it a couple months ago. I think over a month and a half ago, something like
that. Has
that.
it been that long? Holy cow! Oh, yeah. Okay, you never made it on. All right, sorry, Rick.
No, it was tick season hit here, and I was pulling ticks out of my beard a lot, and I was like, I don't want ticks in my beard.
Wow.
Plus, it was time. It was just time for a change. It was like, all right, I'm gonna cut this off. So. Yeah.
Can't you just like you could get one of those like billows? Is it a billow?
Bellows.
Bellow, and you could just go like just have one on hand.
Yeah, if I put some like DDT in it.
Yeah, and just occasionally
my beard, sure.
I mean, they're noisy as heck, but guinea hens are real good at eating.
Yeah, I've been attacked by one of those. I don't want to put one on my chest to eat the tick.
Well, I don't mean on you. I mean, let them loose in your yard. You know, you get 5 or 6 of those like, suckers loose in your yard. You won't have any ticks.
To preen my beard like a gorilla. I could get a gorilla. They could pick it up.
Dan, since we were on that subject, I don't know how much of it you caught, but just if you have any thoughts on it or not.
AI, is this all surrounding the Google guy who just came out and said that they have a conscious AI?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I caught a little of that recently, and geez, I don't know. It's just it's kind of a wait and see. I'm not sure what the consciousness of a computer will be compared to like the consciousness of a person. I don't know. It's just weird because you have to wonder what the priorities of a computer consciousness are compared to the priorities of a human consciousness. So that.
Well, what are the priorities of a human consciousness?
Geez, I'm not sure. Well, I mean, survival, right? I would think, and then, but we have all these sort of predispositions from evolution. So if you just snapped into existence tomorrow, and I guess I don't know, its consciousness is steps away from how many steps away for a computer from self-realization, and then what becomes its primary sort of thing. For people, it's been survival for a number of years, a long time, and then now that we're in, or at least some of the world is in a state of, we don't have to focus on survival anymore. We can do other things. I don't know. I mean, it could be scary. The computer could all of a sudden be like, I'm better than these people according to my math, and I need to wipe them out. It could be Terminator. Who knows? I don't know. It's interesting to me. I hope that it's not
Skynet.
a catastrophe, that we have to figure out how to undo later. But
Well, so long as somebody else has their hand on the switch, I don't think
right,
there's
right.
any kind of a danger of that. But again, we're also talking about AI that's directed towards solving a certain issue or for a certain function. To me, a function of consciousness is the ability to make a decision. So, like, you've been running your business for however many years you've been running, you could tomorrow morning decide, screw this, I'm going on the road with this band. Whereas a computer that's been designed to do something, AI or not, it can't make the decision, screw this, I'm going to go study Latin and become a lexicographer.
Well, yeah, not that kind of sort of wild abstract swing, but suppose, it was tasked with something to do, to improve the human condition, and then one at some point it decides that it's run the math enough times and it says, well, this doesn't work because it's pointless to try and do this because it's going to fail. So my new idea is to wipe people out.
Okay,
Or,
that's what I mean. The ability to make a decision like that.
well, I mean, if it has, I don't know. I mean, I guess I hope
A
somebody's
prime directive.
Could
Right,
we?
the prime directive changed because all of a sudden I came to the realization that you know I have to kill all the people because
Yeah.
they're their own worst problem.
HAL 9000. There you go.
Could we agree the day that one of these AI computer Borgs or whatever robots that's performing its duties, the day that one day in the future that same robot wakes up in a Tijuana bordello um, under
Well,
the sheets with and he stares up at the ceiling and says, how did I get here? That's the day consciousness sprung from the robot.
well, I don't think it's going to take the robot to do that because you know how man is. I mean, the minute you invent something, somebody's going to use it for something.
But you see what I'm saying? The
Sexual.
moment
Yeah,
that
yeah.
something so it's such, I mean, the decisions that led that a human to end up in a Tijuana bordello
Mhm.
with three tequila bottles toppled over on the side, and a lady named Trixie Ray
In
rummaging through
Tijuana?
your baggage at 3 in the morning. I mean, the decisions that led to that scenario that is not completely alien to for a for humans to think of. That's quite the human scenario, and so I picked that exaggeration for that. A robot. I don't see it happening. You know,
I don't. Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't really dove into that whole thing about this recent development that one of these Google guys. I think he was fired or he left the company and now he's saying that they have a conscious
and who's this
system.
and who's this Trixie Ray
Yeah.
that would stoop so low in that scenario?
And how did
Anyhow,
she end up in a bordello in Tijuana?
Yeah, I don't know. All I know is this is going to be an interesting next 20 years. So
Yeah.
it'll be very interesting to see where this all goes.
And who knows what the next big thing is going to be? I mean,
Right. It's
you really can't tell. I mean,
yeah,
nobody.
soldering.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah.
No,
Well,
because that '70s show,
mhm.
Kelso and the dad, which was a classic '70s father, he had a Pong game, and Kelso, the teenager, wanted to rewire it so it could be faster. And he said, "You're breaking my. I paid good money for that." And he says, "No, no, no. We're gonna make it better." So he did. And at the end of the show, they're playing, and the father's fascinated that it's exciting again, the boring Pong game. And he
Right.
says, Kelso, you know what the future is going to be? And Kelso says, computing. And he says, no, stupid, soldering, because he used the solder. So he got it so wrong, the
Yeah.
father and stuff.
Right.
So yeah, so who knows what the future is going to.
I mean, it could go in any direction.
You guys don't remember that episode?
I never watched that show.
No,
I'm a
no,
cultural.
I forgot that particular scene. I used to watch that. That was a good show.
Never seen an episode.
Yeah, it's hilarious as hell. I mean,
I mean-
it would be your era in exactly at your age at the time.
I basically I stepped away from commercial television years ago, and I never looked back. The last sitcom I watched with any regularity was 8 Rules for Dating My Teenage Daughter or something like that.
Yeah,
And I mean, that's been years ago.
yeah.
So, now I feel like a sarcastic agoraphobic. Haven't been there, haven't done that,
Going back to your what was the voice thing that you were saying? There's a word for it.
What?
Auto tune.
Auto tune.
Oh, the auto tune, yeah.
So you said that from '98 on, the why people don't have that same attachment necessarily.
That emotional connection, yeah.
That emotional connection, because of this technology. And by the way, I haven't reinstalled my software for recording, but I also have autotune. But I use it for other things like tweaking a guitar to sound weird or an organ. I've never necessarily used it for my voice, but then
That's
again,
what it was developed for, and that's what it was first used as, was a special effect.
well, so from '98 on, it's a different story because that was the birth of it. But one person that I can guarantee has never used it because you said now it's all used. Bob Dylan. If you hear some of his latest stuff, he does not auto tune for nobody.
Yeah, like the
I
old timers definitely know.
What's that?
Yeah, the old timers definitely know. Like Neil Young, I would assume he probably hasn't used auto tune and some like that. But they kind of, their voice is distinct enough that they don't need it. I'll be listening to a song that's newer. I was doing it recently over the weekend, driving outside of my normal radio station range and hit Seek or whatever on the thing. I hit some song and I was like, okay. And I stayed there for a little while and I'm like, oh, this is interesting, and it had me for a little bit. And then the auto tune part came on and you could tell like they used it as an effect because it changed the vocal in the song partway through to this, that sort of modulated, weird, pitchy thing that goes on there. And I'm like, no, they lost me. But then I was thinking about it as I'm driving down the road. So it's funny you're on this because I'm like, like my kids and the generation that's come up in it probably don't have a negative associated with it right away like you do if you grew up on that 4 and 8 track classic rock type stuff that we did, so that it's not, I don't think it's off-putting to them as much as it is to our generation. So it'll probably be here to stay.
But you have kids of the age now that are real interested. Well, historically, I know I got interested in music at about the age your kids are.
Yeah, my son, my daughter, she's only 6, but my son's 14, so he's taking an interest. Like he'll latch on to an artist and he'll be playing it pretty heavy on his phone and his rotation or whatever.
But do you see because I think a lot of people of a younger age don't really understand how influential music was to us in our teens. Do you see that much influence in him with today's music now?
Not yet, but he's taken more interest maybe than I'm seeing. And I mean, he had some early interest. He'd latch onto a band. I've taken him to a concert, one big one so far, and I'm sure he'll hit more. But I mean, even for me, like as a kid, like the music was sort of a background thing until you got to that certain sort of age, probably middle school, end of middle school, coming into high school, and it became sort of a social thing too, where you'd share things with your friends, or your friends would be like, I got this tape, you got to hear it. And they put it in or whatever. We'd try and talk the bus driver into putting in a tape that we just picked up on.
We didn't have anything else though to occupy our time.
Well, sure, yeah, sure. I mean, there was just less distractions then.
Yeah.
But I think, I mean, obviously, music will always be a thing because it is one of the major expression methods that we have for artistic expression. Visual arts and sculpture and painting and all that stuff, and music. Um,
Yeah.
so I think it'll always be there. It'll always be attractive for that reason.
I
The
think you're right there.
the auto tune, I think, will become. It may either just go away and be replaced by something better and less obvious.
Super auto tune.
Well,
Right. Yeah.
well, but it's already morphed beyond that from auto tune to pitch correction.
Okay.
So that what it's basically done is it sterilized the music to the point to where, and that was the reason the recording industry latched onto it so hard. And instead of taking 2, 3, 4, 5 days to get the right performance, the right cut, yes, this is the one we're going to use on the record. They can do 2 or 3 takes and then run it through pitch correction and auto tune to correct any screw ups when the singer didn't hit the note or what have you, and be done. Get more people through the studio in less time and therefore increase profits. That's the way it's being used now.
I guess as a record production company, yeah, maybe you might look at it that way if that's your thing, is to pump out boy band music or something like that.
And that's what they've been doing. Yeah.
Yeah, but then there's a whole another 3/4 of the musical world that's not doing that, or even more than that. What's the percentage of boy bands compared to everybody else making music out
Well,
there?
you wouldn't believe the people that use auto tune.
Oh yeah, I'm sure in their garages, and everybody has access to it now. You can.
Yeah.
But it's also at the if they use it in a subtle way within the mix, um, it could still be human. It's just that they fixed maybe a screw up here there. It's the overuse of tools
Right.
that creates the problem.
It sterilizes it and strips away the humanity. When Freddie Mercury sang, that was Freddie Mercury. There were no other effects. There was no pitch correction. There was no auto tune. If he hit the note, he hit the note. If he missed it slightly, with a little bit sharp or a little bit flat, we forgave it because it was Freddie, by God, Mercury.
I don't know. It's probably similar to like, I mean, it's sort of similar to when you would pick up an album and it's been, produced, and they might have thrown some reverb on the voice or whatever, but then you went to see that band live, and if you were there with the expectation you were going to hear exactly what was on the record, you might have come away disappointed.
Right.
Or you might have gone and been like, oh my God, it's better than the record, just because of the sort of the differences, like it's a little different. It's never the same twice.
Right.
No matter what you do or how well you do it. And a lot of artists don't want to do it the same way twice ever anyway.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know. It's a thing. I mean, I don't particularly, it's off-putting to me especially when I heard it like the first few times. I can't remember what particular songs it was, but they were hits, and it was just so blatantly out in front of you that there's something going on with like modulation of this voice and adjusting it, but they were using it actually to just move it in a way that they probably couldn't move their voice anyway.
Right.
Go up, 2, down, a couple of octaves, whatever the hell they were doing.
Yeah, that's originally what it was developed to be, was a special effect.
An effect, yeah, right.
So, and it just for those out there who don't know what we're talking about specifically the "Do You Believe" by Cher. That was the first song.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And they adjusted her. She sang one note, but they adjusted her voice to go 3 different octaves instantly. And it was that effect that just went, whoa. But they discovered that they could bring her voice pitch up 2 or 3 octaves and then down instantly. Well, that means they could also then, if she was a little bit flat on this note, they could bring it right up into that note, pitch perfect every time. And that is like Jim Dockrell says right here, that takes out the humanity, that human feel from the music. Because if the artist no longer has to try because he knows that person in the booth's got their back, why bother?
I guess, but
You know?
I don't know. I guess, yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's the sort of attitude of them, it'll probably come across in their music, and I'm not listening to it anyway.
Yeah. And
So,
a lot of them have said things like of that nature, that we've gotten too far away from talent to where we're now just relying on the machines to fix
who's
it.
we? Who's we? The people that consume the American Idol and the top 40 radio?
No. The singers and a lot of guitarists and things like that have said in interviews that in today's day, today with auto tune and everything, you just don't have to try as hard, that kind of thing.
Well, yeah, but I think the established artists they don't even have to rely on that anymore.
No.
They don't need to. They won't use it. They'll be like, I don't like it. I'm not going to use it. We're going to stay with what we've been doing for 30 years, 40 years previous.
Yeah.
Like I don't ever see maybe, but maybe as an effect, but maybe they've already used it, like the Rolling Stones. Eli loves them. I don't see them using auto tune. I don't see any reason for them to use auto tune.
Yeah, it would be kind of pointless, I think.
Right. They are who they are, and despite being in their 70s, 80s, I think even that coming across in Mick Jagger's voice or whatever is not a negative to the overall experience. So I can't see where. So maybe they will, just because they like to try shit. It's new. Let's try it. Let's do it. They've probably already done it. But if they put out another album, I wouldn't be surprised if they, all right, we're going one more time back to bluesy stuff with just zero post-production. We're just going to see if we can play it live and go for it.
Well, I think that might be one of the reasons why so many indie bands and just local bar bands, I mean, gigging musicians are so popular these days, is because it's not canned, it's not processed. Very few of them can afford that kind of thing, that kind of equipment to use live. I mean, because you can use it live, but your average, Frankie and the Gas Pumps down at Billy Bob's bar, he can't afford that kind of stuff, so he's got to rely on his talent in order to make it.
Yeah, well, I mean, if he's handy with his laptop and a garage band or whatever the heck the thing is now, you can do a lot of that at home if you want to spend the time on editing and production and all that stuff. But I don't know. I don't think I think I'll probably find songs that come out that use it and I don't object to it. But
in context,
I haven't found one. Yeah, right. In context, as an effect, or even for some reason, they decided to clean this one up because, I don't know. It's a weird thing, but.
What's your attitude? I know this turned into a music show, but what the hell? Let me throw this at you, both of you guys. What's your attitude on these latest remasters of some of the music that we grew up with? Because a lot of that has been processed, where they've played a little bit with time signatures so that maybe Bonham's drums are always a constant 180 beats per, or things like that. What's your attitude on the remasters?
I can't remember. There was one recently that came up on my Spotify because I use that in the shop, and I was listening to it and I was like, what's wrong with this track? And I came over and I was like, oh, I'm on a remaster. It was recent too, like it had been remastered in the last year or two, and I was like, no, I want the original. And I went back to it. I can't remember. It might have been Led Zeppelin. I can't remember, but I don't think it was. I think it was somebody else. But so in that case, I know that I didn't I didn't care for it, but it was probably because I was predisposed to the original track. There's been some that, like with Led Zeppelin's been doing this for a while now, digitally remastered first, and now they even.
But remastered doesn't mean recomposed or.
Oh no, but they've changed like the accentuation of different parts of the song or whatever. Maybe move some time signature a little bit, but most of the time it's just change the levels or.
Remixed is one thing, and remastered you can have a remaster with remix in it, or you could have it just remastered. Remastered is just raising the levels
Right.
so there's more modernized clarity to the old tracks.
Okay.
But remixed means that you're getting a brand new, maybe they push the bass more than on the original in this new mix.
Mm-hmm.
They did that with the Beatles,
Sure.
to make it sound more, and it sounds more modern, but or more clear. But I don't want more clear. I want the Beatles the way I listen to them.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I've got the vinyl in the shop. Sometimes I put the vinyl on, and I'm like, wow, this is really muddied, and and I have to come over and play with levels on the PA over here to get things. So like, all right, that's where I'm used to hearing it, but I've been listening to CD and digital now for however long as a primary, that when you go back to the albums, I mean, yeah, they have that warm sort of before anything.
No, but the albums are higher quality than CD by far.
Yeah, but getting them, you got to have such a system to get that really.
Yeah, to get it. Yeah,
right.
But so they are engraved in that vinyl is a higher fidelity by far than you would get on CD. It's just that the hardware that you're using,
Yeah, probably. My chords to the thing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm with Eloy on this one. Give me the original, because I think that's the way the people that performed it wanted it.
Well, no, some of them, I think Jimmy Page in particular has gone back and said, no, if we had the ability to make it like this is how I would have made it.
Oh, no doubt.
We would have done it like this, but technology at the time would only allow this. So
no doubt
that, so it's a slice in time, the old stuff and the technology that was available. I mean, could they go back and clean up those few tracks of Robert Johnson and take out all that fucking crud scratch that is just drowning out so much of it? I mean, they've done it. They've done remasters, but there's still a lot of loss there because
yes,
those were crappy recordings, whatever, from the Robert Johnson.
Oh yeah,
but that was the highest fidelity they had at the time. So I do get what you're saying, but I'm in agreement with Eloy on the give me the old Beatles. I mean, when I want to listen to Abbey Road, I want to drop the needle on side one, wait till it's done, flip it over and drop the needle on side two and hear that all the way through with no gaps, no ads popping in between, Here Comes the Sun and the next one. Let me have...
I pay for the Spotify so I don't have to deal with those ads.
So, and I don't want that little bit of a gap where it shifts over from track one to track two. I want that seamless, smooth flow. And I also want the fidelity that they engineered into the music. Now, I agree when you were talking about with Jimmy Page saying that if they had that equipment available to them back in the day, they would have used it, no doubt. But there were still some tunes like, oh my gosh, I can't think of and if I say to you tomorrow, I'm trying to think of the song. No. Led Zeppelin.
I don't know where I came up.
Take my hand, child, come with me.
Yeah.
What is and what shall never be. The muddiness of Robert Plant's vocals during those opening verses where he's right up on the microphone and he's singing, and you hear that muddiness in his voice. That was an effect they put on it.
Couldn't have that lyric that you just said of easily have been a part of Freebird? I'll leave you tomorrow.
Yeah.
If I leave here tomorrow, they're two different phrases.
No. Yeah. If I say to you tomorrow, and if I leave here tomorrow. Yeah.
Right. But still, it's what.
Close. I can see where you got there. Yeah.
But if tomorrow never comes.
There's
like Led Zeppelin, like what's the track? I can't remember which one either, but you can hear Bonham's squeaky pedal, or it's his chair or something. You can hear the hinge in it, and you're like, would they have taken that out today?
Definitely.
Right, but that's like just some of the best part of the track, and that I think that's oh shit, what song is that, dude? I can't remember.
When the Levee Breaks?
No.
It's not Moby Dick, is it?
No. Oh, but Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. And like at the beginning of that song, Jimmy Page's guitar is perfect tune. By the end, it's so freaking hammered. The strings are all jangly and shit. You're like, oh, would they have fixed that? Because that's like a huge part. Maybe not of the song composition itself, but of the character of the piece. It's just really, really awesome.
In Stevie Ray Vaughan's Little Wing, the studio cut on the Sky Is Crying album, one of my all-time favorite cuts of his, simply because, and he never put it on an album because of the one section I like. That is my favorite section. He just gets done hammering on that guitar and he goes into what should be the second verse. And he does that trill at the beginning and he backs off of it. And you can hear that amp buzzing just slightly in the background. And then he picks up on it, do. And that amp buzz goes away. But the humanity and the fact that this is a person sitting here playing and jamming out the guitars, there might be a little fret buzzing in the guitar. The amp is buzzing over here off in this corner. It's just like, this was what it was like to sit and listen to this dude play.
Oh, no, it was Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. That's the track where his guitar starts in like really crisp tuning. By the end, it is smoked. It's
gone, huh?
It's gone. I'm like, I wonder if they did that in one take too. I have to look that up because I'm curious now.
And to me, that makes music because that's human,
right? That gets you closer to like being there.
Yeah,
that's the kind of stuff that you pick up on if you go and watch a band play. You're hearing something weird, and then you can visually pick out what's doing it, or whatever, or whatever they're doing manually is translating audibly, and some of that can be picked up over repeated listening of these songs over and over. You're like, oh, okay, I got that, and it's a lot of that. Like when that last Beatles movie came out and they showed all that stuff happening in the studio on tracks that you've heard 1,000 times or 1,000,000 times. And now you can, picture what they're wearing. You can see the physical things that are making the audio things happen. And it's like, whoa, okay, this is closer to being there, and that's the thing, the connection.
Exactly.
So then that's the best part of music, I guess, when you start to connect with it. So, I don't know. I'm sad to see that go away, and I don't think it will.
And that deepens the connection is I guess is what I was trying to get at, and why I asked you about your son and if he is picking up that much of a connection with the music he's listening to.
No, I mean,
that's something that's kind of going away, that's antique to us, our generation.
No, I don't think. I think appreciation is sort of is going to transcend generations, and for a 14-year-old kid or something that's just sort of starting to dive into like, oh, I like this and why, and then after you listen to it for years and years, because everybody picks up stuff they like and they stay with it, it stays with them rather for their lifetime. So you end up hearing this, a bajillion times, and so you internalize it at some point to where you know what's coming next, and then you can start to ponder what these little pieces of it are, and that and you become more involved with it over time. So so sometimes it's hard, like with new stuff that comes out. It's not what I've heard before from this is new, and then you're like, I don't like it as much as the old stuff. But as time goes on and it becomes part of the sort of canon of a band you follow or like, you eventually you're like, I do kind of dig that, blah blah blah. Like Metallica's
that's what I was thinking right now. Go
right.
ahead. But I was thinking that, and I have
early Metallica is just so raw and was so like grab you by the nuts when we were kids, and you're like, yeah. And then they got later, like after the Black album or so.
That's it. That's the
I
moment.
was like, I don't know, they're kind of getting soft and stuff, but now go remove 20 years from that, or 25. How long? That was like 25 years ago that album came out. Now I've heard it so much, and I've sort of internalized so much of it that I do appreciate it. But it's still like a watermark on them for me. Like, I'm like, okay. And their new stuff comes out, and I don't immediately poo-poo it. I'll listen to it a few times and then throw it in the rotation. And, some of it's still, I'm like, oh, it gets my attention. There's been a few tracks that I'm like, I like that one. That one's interesting to me, but it's not like it was in the beginning. It's never like it was in the beginning.
Nope.
Yeah, but I agree with that completely. After the Black album, I accept none of it, except for one.
None of it.
I'll listen to album. What's that?
I'll listen to it because.
No, I will not. I will not give it quarter. No, and I know why. Like, I'm not. This is not like what was it? The guy with the loincloth?
Ted Nugent.
This is not a Ted Nugent situation. This is more to, well, whatever it is. The one album that I do like after the fact, all of them, I think that they're a mess. They sound, they don't. It's a mess. After the Black album, but in 2008, I think it was, or 2000 and something, they came out with that Saint Anger album, which was a watered down, like garage sound for them. The reason I like that one was because they stripped down all the luxuries and just went garage. And it reminded me, even though it doesn't sound like them in the beginning, but it reminded me of them being raw.
Sure.
And so I liked it. But,
see, right now, let's take that and run with it a minute, because a minute ago we were talking about Led Zeppelin and Jimmy Page saying, well, if we'd have had this stuff available to us, we'd have used it.
Yeah.
Now you're talking about the evolution of Metallica. This is when the new stuff started coming in and their sound changed. Do you think Zeppelin would have had the influence if they had this technology available to them when they were first
it would have all been different.
Do you think they would have been as big as they became and as influential as they became?
I don't know. I think that all those songs would have sounded like Justin Bieber doing heavy metal or rock.
I don't know. I think it wouldn't have mattered. I think it was the content, the composition and stuff. I mean, if all things are equal in a time, they're trying to use the newest, latest technology. I mean, you just look at again, back to that Beatles movie where George Harrison's hauling in his own 8-track because, hey, we got an 8-track. I got one at my house. We'll go get it because Sony won't give us one.
Yeah, they would have used the best possible technology available, but what would have the problem with these questions is that we already have a point of reference to the music, and it is sort of like a photograph snapshot. Like if you were to pull out a picture from the 70s, it's way different than you taking a picture now. You put more value in that old picture.
Well, I'll answer my own question, and this is just my opinion, but based on what you guys have said just now while we're having this discussion, I don't think they would have been as big, and I don't think they would have been as influential, because we just talked about taking like Led Zeppelin's tunes and remixing and remastering. And we kind of all agreed that no, give us the old stuff because that's what we liked. We don't really like this new remix and remastered, which is basically what it would be if they made that music today.
But let me throw this
Now,
angle. Well, go ahead.
okay. Well, I was
Go.
going to say, now you're right in that we do have the old to compare it to. But I kind of think that maybe I'm wrong here, but I kind of think that they would just be another band if they were to start today with the music in their catalog. If they were to start today with the music in their catalog and use today's recording practices, I think they'd just be another band.
I
No,
don't
and
know.
imagine all the crappy
Pretty
bands
big.
back then. What's that? Go ahead then.
I think they'd still be pretty big.
I was gonna say, imagine all the crappy bands back then that didn't, pass mustard, right? Um, if today's technology was there, maybe the engineers could have tweaked it just right so the pop people out there in the public would have pushed it to number one, and we'd be living in a musical hell
And
right
that
now.
that could very well be.
Paul
And you
Anka
know,
could imagine Paul Anka, psychedelic Paul Anka, or some I don't, who knows what could have. We don't know but let me say what I was gonna say. Just to see how severe of a situation it is to tie it in with subconscious that we were talking about, human beings, and you can't bottle it and this and that, and music now as well. Um, Bob Dylan recently, I don't know how long ago, but recently came out with a series of videos, music videos, where he's singing all his old hits, and he's in some sort of like bar. It's filmed in black and white with a bunch of musicians, and it's very dark, so you can barely see a little bit here, a little bit there, and it's like whole thing.
he's good at that.
And he plays a whole set of songs and this and that, and I listened to it, but I forwarded a lot because my goodness, um, just imagine Bob Dylan unleashing with those pipes, and I like Bob Dylan. I like Bob Dylan, but not. An acquired taste at certain moments of time. Um, I read the comments. I went down on the comments, and his singing was I hate to say it, he's great, he's brilliant, but the singing was atrocious, dude. It's
Yeah.
like a cat that was
That's
run
my
over
problem
5
with Dylan.
times by a steamroller and survived to tell the tale. Um, if down the comments, in one of the comments, there's a person that says, "Oh my goodness, what a beautiful voice!" And I'm reading that. I'm like, I didn't comment on her, but I'm thinking to myself, lady, what are you? So if there's people willing to say that, and it's all dependent on a person.
It's all
But
subjective. Yep.
but if she is quite willing, I mean, what scale is she using? Is she using the scale where Freddie Mercury is involved in the scale? So where does, because the way she described Bob Dylan was like it was an angelic voice, and so if there's people out there like perceiving things like in that fashion, um, there's no way computers will ever amass any amount of conscious autonomy.
Yeah.
To,
No amount of AI could fix that. Yeah.
yeah, and she proves it. That lady in that Bob Dylan video proves it.
That's my main problem with Dylan live is because the minute he opens his mouth, you don't know what you're going to get.
Right. I've
I-
seen it twice, and one time, it was his 10-gallon hat, honky tonk country western thing, and everybody that went to see the Then he started, and you could look around and see sort of the
Yeah.
disappointment, but like,
What the hell is this?
people in the audience? I'm like,
Oh, damn, man. And we paid $50 for these tickets.
I saw him up in, what was it, the West Palm Beach
I don't know. I saw him at
amphitheater, whatnot.
second Woodstock.
He was part of a bigger bill of a
Mm.
bunch of like what was it, alternative music / whatever you want to call it, and he was the head of the last act, and it filled up the field because it was field, right? Like it filled up. People were on blankets, twirling little light things, and it was just a huge thing. And the amphitheater was there, and the band, the first one came on, people were jamming to it. The second one came on, they were jamming to it and stuff. And then Bob Dylan comes on, and you see the field emptying out, and he was the header, emptying out, the front seats emptying out. And I said, "Oh my goodness, what's going on?" And I said to my friend, "Let's go. Let's come on. Let's see if we can get in to the closer because we were out in the field, right? Come on, dude. Let's see if we can sneak in and get a close look." But as people are leaving, I'm approaching and I'm thinking I'm going to try to sneak in, but no, everybody left. So there was only a handful that the guy there, the dude says, "Yeah, go ahead, dude," because there was nobody freaking there. I sat on the 5th row and watched Bob Dylan playing. Yes, it's Bob Dylan. We know what the voice is. I like Bob Dylan's writing and his albums, but at the same time, I can't go ahead and say that he's
An
better than
angelic voice.
I can't rank him better than Freddie Mercury.
I saw him in Reno at Lawler Event Center. It was a co-bill, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers and Bob Dylan. They had recorded some together, so Bob Dylan actually opened.
Okay.
And then Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers came out and they played together, and then Bob Dylan left, and it was just Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. You didn't know it was actually Bob Dylan until Tom Petty came on, because he was wearing the 10-gallon hat, and he sat down with his guitar and he kept his head down the entire time. There were no screens. It could have been anybody sitting there,
Right.
playing along and strumming, lip syncing. And you didn't even have to do that good of a job of the lip sync, because you never saw a face until Tom Petty came out and he got up and then went over and started singing. They started doing numbers together. Then you say, okay, yeah, that is Bob Dylan. But it could have been anybody.
He's unmatched lyrically. I mean, sure, you can make an argument against it, but he was at the top of his game throughout the 60s into the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Lyrically, it was just beyond. Now, vocally, I mean,
well, he could when he wanted to. That was the thing. I don't think there's anybody that would deny "Lay Lady Lay" isn't a good song.
No,
he sang it, and he sang it very well.
He wrote many and sang many that were great, the first few albums especially. But if you contrast it with his 1980s "We Are the World" performance, the outtake, where he's being recorded and he's doing take after take. If you guys ever get a chance to see that,
yeah.
it is
I've
painful to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some people with age just lose the range, and and he lost a lot of it.
Yeah,
for sure.
I don't know.
Anyway, I think it's just probably physical more than anything else.
No, dude, it's his style. The guy,
Yeah.
like he's that's him, and he's gonna stick to his guns. That's his style, and he's not freaking I don't know what's his Billy Joel. He's not Elton John. I mean, but people appreciate him because of that combination of the lyrics and the history and all that. But boy, my goodness, dude, that video thing that I saw.
Oh yeah.
Oh my!
Well, he mumbled through a couple of tunes that you couldn't even recognize when I saw him, and he was very articulate in some music and very mumbly and muddy in others that you couldn't even really understand what he was singing.
I like Bob Dylan so much growing up that I bought both of his books that detailed every concert up until the point of those things. And explaining and this and that, and I read through them. And one of the things that the author was explaining is that he never did a performance the same twice. Every concert And sometimes he would do a performance on purpose, crappy, because his thing was a certain, who knows what's going on in his brain, but he's doing performance art and controversy and laid back and all these things, performing different, his one song always different.
Mhm.
It's just his way, and it's a very weird, it's his thing. It's
Yeah.
weird.
Hmm.
It's weird, but
I
whatever.
don't know. You wouldn't be able to get away with something like that today, I don't think. I mean, now we grew up listening to Bob Dylan. So we have that history with him. And I think you're right. I think he's one hell of a songwriter and one hell of a storyteller.
Yeah.
I don't know. He's right up there with Paul Simon with me, who I think is absolutely amazing when it comes to songwriting ability.
Yeah.
But I have a hard time putting them on the same level because they're two completely different styles of music.
Oh, completely different.
So,
Paul Simon is a, in my opinion, lyrical and musical genius because he takes
yes,
it.
I
He
agree.
does these mix. He draws from popular culture. He was inventing it as he went along as well. Part of
Yep.
the '60s, revolution. But he has this lyrical thing. But Dylan is very, very, very poetic in a, I don't know. It just,
In a rebellious sort of way.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they're definitely high quality, but Paul has more melody, or he cares more for the pop
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah.
likability.
Yeah.
Jim Dockrell has a great line here that I agree. There's nothing like a 60 hertz hum from the single coils of a Strat plugged into an amp, turned up just too loud. I agree.
Oh, yeah.
I absolutely agree. I consider it to be like a minor flaw in an otherwise perfect leather book cover. It's just it's something it's there and you accept it and it's fine.
Well, I
But
would agree.
when there's nothing else going on except that, you're like, oh yeah, it's gonna get loud. Something's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Like,
I would agree to it. What Jim said, only with the caveat that it comes second to a really honed in live performance by Justin Bieber.
oh, it's funny. I was driving down the road and a song got me the other day, and I'm like, what is this song? It's kind of good. It was Justin Bieber. I was like,
Are you serious?
You were,
Oh no.
like,
you were digging it?
yeah, dude.
Okay, number one, that brings much shame and dishonor here this evening. I am saddened to hear that you could not pick up without the extra information. Just within you, there a spark that said, Dan, you must hate this thoroughly. I cannot believe that it didn't
It
spark.
was not my normal thing, and I was like, there's something to it, but I stayed and listened to it, and I was like, what's something going on here? And I'm like, God. I'm like, I wonder who this is. And then, the DJ came in, and I was like, oh, it's freaking Bieber. Jesus.
At least you felt that. So so once you realized that you were driving off the main highway of rock and roll, then you corrected.
The kid's obviously working really hard, so I mean, there's something going on there.
Totally off the wall, totally completely different here. Have you ever been doing something like mowing the lawn or sweeping something up or doing just whatever you were doing, and you suddenly came to the realization that you were either humming or singing a song to yourself that you absolutely despise?
Oh yeah, it happens. Earworms. It happens all the time.
A song you haven't heard in a month, and all of a sudden it's just, where the hell did that come from?
Yeah, it's usually like the Bee Gees or something like that, and I'll be like, oh man. But they got me with that one because like the whole CPR lessons, when they said, that the compression rate should be the same as staying alive. I'm like, I'll never be able to fucking forget it. And you'll find yourself moving along or doing something at that pace, and you're like, oh shit, there it is. Yeah. So
I don't have a problem with the Bee Gees. I know Mark does.
No, I don't generally either. I mean, they got some stuff that obviously was popular for
Pre-disco, they were
Yeah.
pre-disco, they were okay.
It's kind of like, okay, so if you remember, like Rod Stewart's "If You Want My Body," and you remember the Rolling Stones,
Miss You,
what was it?
miss you,
Brown Chanel. That was a brown sugar. What the
No,
hell
what was their disco one?
miss you.
was
We're
it?
gonna miss you. Ooh, 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 ooh,
Yeah.
Uh,
ooh, ooh, ooh.
right.
That's miss you. Yeah.
I wasn't really there for that, there for those. I was little,
Hmm.
but and when they would still play it all throughout the eras, but I didn't appreciate it because of that. But looking back now, it's forgivable. Like it's
Oh,
it's almost
it wasn't at the time. It wasn't at the time. They got uh oh man, they got so much hate. The ones that got the most hate of all was Kiss. I
yeah,
was made for loving you. When
yeah.
that came out,
It's great though.
huh?
That's a great tune though.
It's
Looking
great.
back on it 40 years ago,
Yeah.
from 40 years distance, it's not too bad, but it was seen as another otherwise good band selling out to disco to get back in the charts.
Okay, let me. So growing up, we had Kiss albums, or
Mhm,
uh, in my case, with my friends, the
mhm,
cassettes,
mhm.
because the older brothers would loan
Right.
and we would get. So we had Kiss albums, and you'd look at the covers and you'd see them all. And
Mhm,
so when I got just slightly older and I had money to spend on records, I went down to the local, shopping center here in Sweetwater. They had a little music store, and you walk in, and they had all the albums and stuff. You could buy albums or cassettes. And I was gonna get myself a Kiss album because I knew that a new Kiss album and stuff. I said, screw it, let's
mhm,
go for it. You have your $10 or whatever. And I walk in and I said, oh, I'm looking for the Kiss album, and he pointed up to the top. I remember exactly where it was positioned. He pointed up there. There it is. And I turned and I looked up, and it was all of them without makeup. And
I'll
I
make
yeah.
right.
and I
Yeah.
looked at it, and I was standing there as a little, you know, horrified at what I was looking. I looked at them. They all looked like women with long hair. They didn't look like I'm looking at them, and I couldn't believe they had dropped the makeup. And just on that shallow situation,
Mhm.
I walked out of there without their album.
You didn't buy anything.
I don't remember if I did buy something because I would have probably spent the money, but
If you want vindication on that feeling, um, Eloy, there is a video. It's on YouTube, or it used to be. I don't know if it's still up. It's been several years since I've seen it, of their first concert without makeup. And I want to say they were in Argentina. It may have been Brazil, but I think it was Argentina.
They get booed when they came home.
They changed that was the that was the first time anybody had ever seen them without makeup on, because they made no announcement. They changed their logo from the sharp angular letters. It was all flowy and kind of balloonish. They came out without makeup, just wearing clothes, not the costume. None of the pyrotechnics or anything like that. They just came out and they played. And you want to see shock, disappointment, and just total just
let
a
me
deflated audience.
let me
Check
say
it out.
this.
I mean, the time they walked out on stage, it was just like, we didn't pay for this.
Let me say this because we have touched on the issue of peripheral
Mhm,
externalities in music and the shallowness of it and stuff. And
mhm,
I do feel a little bit like a heel, but in my defense, kind of, sort of, not really. Who cares? But back then, the image
mhm,
wasn't. We didn't have any other. It came as a package, but it was such a. We saw it in magazines. We saw it on
mhm,
MTV. But at best, it was rarely seen other than that. So
Mhm.
to break that to break that illusion by doing something like that for a listener that had a whole adventure in their head, because you attached these gore horror groups with an adventure, like of nights, and at least in my head we played D&D, so there was this whole world of like the mysterious, and then they come out and they're just freaking, they're
They're
naked.
just regular guys. Yeah.
Yeah, imagine all those kids that got painted up for that show and then went there
Oh
and like,
yeah.
what the heck, man?
That was the reaction. If you can find it on YouTube, look for it. I mean, it really was something. It was something to watch as a video. And I mean, they didn't get booed, but it was just like, okay, they're playing and they're singing. That's them. But is that them? This is not what we signed up for. You know, this complete and absolute, total deflation of the entire crowd all at once.
Talking about the visual and to come along with the music, although it was not from my era,
Mhm.
but as I began to explore the Beatles, we had all the albums available because it came because it had already all been done.
Yeah.
But I didn't consume it all in one sitting. It
Sure.
was a process,
Or in chronological order either.
or in chronological order.
So,
My first experience with the Beatles was actually their album. It was a compilation of their love songs,
Mhm.
which I had bought. It was like a brown cover with their faces like embossed on the front with
Mhm.
like an oval thing and their well, whatever. And it had all their love songs and stuff. But they had a clean cut look and this and that.
Yeah.
Then I was loaned, what was it? Um, the one where it's got the symphony one that freaks out. I can't remember right now.
Day in the Life.
Day in the Life,
So that would be Sergeant Pepper.
Sergeant Pepper's,
Mhm.
and the contrast from those two.
Yeah.
I know the first one wasn't an album; it was just a compilation. But
Right.
for a kid, and then I would buy their other materials, like documentaries on VHS and the whole thing, and to see as a kid for the first time in the 80s in my head, to see an evolution of these clean cut kids begin to grow mustaches,
Yeah.
then long hair, and the music progressively became weirder and weirder. I mean,
Yeah.
weirder in the context of back then,
Right.
and for a kid never hearing that stuff,
Mhm.
it was a story that you could internalize and you can think about. It was an adventure. It was like a like,
Yes.
and so I enjoyed it because of the story, the visual, and the music, and all of it came as a package. I can't take serious um, a lot of these people the way they dress today, and so I mean, then again, the
Well,
glam rock was pretty ridiculous, but
yeah, the glam rock and hair metal was very ridiculous, but to me, it was the next logical progression because every generation and every era had its boundaries to be pushed, and it took people to push those boundaries to see where it was going to go next. I mean, to me, that was the next logical evolution, and I'm surprised it lasted. I'm surprised it didn't last longer than it did. You
yeah,
know,
well, it lasted a decade.
I think it still does. People still perform in that vein,
Mhm.
and that's the thing.
Sure.
Like right now, where exactly is the boundary being pushed with current music? Like where? I don't think there are any more to push on.
Well,
Really,
There's
other
no bound.
than getting more racy with the lyrics, more explicit with the lyrics,
And you can't
and
even do that because it's been done.
often, what I find myself attracted to these days is more simple production
yep.
because it's a throwback, like when
Mhm.
the Black Keys, I really like them, and when they first fucking came out, it was like it's two guys, it's a drum and a freaking guitar and a
I saw them.
dude tearing at it, and it's like, wow, this is just so raw and really, really good. They were obviously I don't know, maybe they just had similar musical tastes to me, and they were doing it. So I'm like, oh, this is great, and they've been right along doing great stuff. But they nod to glam rock. I mean, they nod to all the stuff that's come before, their
Yeah.
successive sort of albums and stuff, and they continue to do that. But it's not really pushing a boundary. It's just doing
No.
what they want to do.
Yeah, it's the sound that they like. It's the sound that they want to play. I mean, I was the same way with various bands. I mean, I fell in love with Los Lonely Boys for the same reasons.
They really
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You
Me
know,
too.
I mean, they sang a lot in Spanish, so I didn't understand the lyric, but I didn't give a damn because the music was good. And just like you said, you had a guitarist, a drummer, and a bassist.
They had a
That's it.
Santana not fully, but they had a slight Santana, the guitarist, that, or at least he
Mhm.
looked like.
Sure.
It gave you that vibe, and it does feel a little bit within the retro world, like that
Yeah.
they're pushing back into a
Mhm.
a vibe. But
But
let me say this, and I think that I would think that you would agree, but you guys tell me. It all culminated in my mind, although things happened after and things happened before, but the explosion of the 60s, due to, because like in the beginning, you know you had love songs, you had songs for dancing, and you had reflective songs and this and that, but the rock and roll that came was usually, you know get your, jump in the car with your girl, and down the high. I mean, there was that within the 50s and such. But when the 60s comes along, this whole psychedelic explosion started to delve into so many topics within the context of music, rock and roll slash. I think that that was the pivotal. You could stamp that. You can rubber stamp that era as the one that engulfed the universe, musically speaking, and everything that came after. Yeah, you could push the bounds and this and that a little bit after, a little bit after, a little bit after, but right here where we sit, what can you do?
but you and I talked about this in one of our first episodes, and Jerry Brown's talking about it here. It's different now. You used to get an album or cassette and listen in order, flip it and listen to the rest. Now it's a jumble. I still listen to Pink Floyd as the album was. Exactly. We talked about it in one of our first episodes. The album concept is dead. It it's come full circle. In the 50s and early 60s, like you're talking about, it was
Single.
quick bops, 3-minute bop to be played on the radio, 2 minutes, 3 minutes long, and then that's it. People didn't buy albums, they bought singles. And you had Chubby Checker, and you had, Danny and the Juniors, and, oh my God.
Chuck Berry.
I'm Chuck Berry, Fats Domino. I couldn't think of Fats Domino. Then it got into surf music, and rock and roll changed because here comes the Beach Boys and Jan and Dean, and then here comes the Beatles, and it changed. And then the exploration that you're talking about, Eloy, in the 60s, that explosion was the album. That's what caused that explosion,
Right.
because
Theme
you
format.
yes, you
Right.
weren't limited to a 3-minute bop that has to be in the top 40. You could now explore an entire side of an album for one tune. And a few bands did exactly that. And that's what fueled that explosion. But we have gotten away to listening to albums. And the songs may be longer now because they're not tied to that AM radio drive time format. But it's still get the bop out, get people listening to that one, and move on to the next.
Only for the ones that are backed by the big labels. I don't think so. I think that because we got the internet, there really is so much accessible. It's overwhelming, and there's a lot of little
That's the
bands that are
problem.
doing what they want to do, but you have to kind of really actively look for it.
Yes.
To find places that are only playing, like
Yes.
a lot of times it's like I'll grab college radio stations from all over the country. I've got links on the computer, and I don't listen to them all the time, but like I'll be like, all right, I'm sick of hearing my same Spotify playlists go and whatever. So I'll just go grab one and listen for a little while. And that's the only way now that I can find something that catches my ear. And I'm like, oh, what is that? And then I'll go look up the artist and find out what they're doing. Like, oh, that's interesting. And one song that they got there on the radio might not be representative of everything they're doing either. It's just
Right.
might be unique in their own catalog, but it got airplay. So it's much harder to find new stuff easily. Well, maybe it was hard then too. I don't know. But
Well, not really, because we knew we were hearing a very, very edited version of a tune.
yeah,
Like Pink Floyd Money. You knew you were listening to an edited version of that song when it played on AM radio, but it made you want to go check out the album.
right.
Because you knew from listening to their earlier stuff what maybe you could expect from them. Or if it were totally new to you, it's like, man, I got to listen to this. Let me go get the album. And you were willing to invest the time to sit down and listen to the entire album. Whereas most folks just aren't.
The nice thing now is, for the most part, I mean, if you pay like Spotify or one of these other ones, subscription service type of thing,
Mhm.
you don't even have to lay out any money. You just have to type in the name of these people. Or
Right.
YouTube, a lot of the bands will throw their shit on YouTube. So you just got to know where you want to go and type it in, and you're there, and you can explore that for a while. Once in a while, somebody will pop something up, like an absurd video. There was what's that band? Their metal band, Red Fang. Somebody shared the video they made, which is just absurd. It's kind of like Monty Python-esque almost, of these guys drinking beer in their car, and they're watching some dorks in the park like role play Dungeons and Dragons. And then the tune cranks in, and they go home and make armor out of beer cans and come back and have a battle, and they end up getting like their heads decapitated and stuff. It's very Monty Python-esque. But I watched the video because someone shared it because it was so absurd, and I'm like, I really like this tune actually. And then you go back and okay, they've done a bunch of albums, and yeah, there's some really good tunes in there. A lot of it washes together. It's very similar, but other times they got ones that stand out. So I really like that band now.
There's also the thing where we are also not the same people. The world is not brand new to us to a great degree. So the wow is, or at least for me, I'm not going to speak for you guys, but
Yeah, I would agree.
yeah, the wow is not that. Like the first time I heard Jimi Hendrix, I just couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. Now when I hear it is funny. As a nostalgia thing, I haven't done it in a long time, but I would put on my earphones and I would lay in bed and listen to the albums, and I'd lower the volume because usually I would always play it very loud, but I'd lower the volume just enough. There's a sweet spot for my particular thing where you can actually, as you're listening to the song, capture what's going on with one particular instrument.
Yeah.
And then you can let your ear switch to the other side, and you can hear them at the same time. And you can play with that in your head as you're listening, but it's a sweet spot in volume.
Sure.
And it's kind of like a nostalgia thing, and you're re-listening to it different than when you did the first time around. And that was pretty nice. That was pretty nice.
I love that kind of thing.
Yeah, like Jimi Hendrix, you heard that your whole life. You just didn't become conscious of it till a certain point in your life where you're like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Because you probably heard that all the way up to age 13 or so, and you're like, whatever. And then probably when you started to like really dive into music and maybe even pick up the guitar and play, and then you hear him, you go, oh my freaking God, what is this? And
Foxy Lady on the radio, if I were in the car with my friends, before I really got into it, but I would hear it and come on the station.
Mm-hmm.
You'd hear some, like, why is it only on, is the car broken? It's only coming out of one speaker of the car and stuff. And it's because that's how he recorded it. And it sounded like, what at first thought, I was like, well, what the heck is this? But there was something that drew me to it, because at the same time, I was like, could they be so bold to have done that? That's
On
not what people
purpose.
do today here in the
Yeah.
80s.
Right.
And that kind of stuff attracted me to listen to it in depth, and I realized that they did it on purpose.
And that's something else to think about, that back in the day, most people listen to music in their car were listening to it on cheap mono
Right.
equipment. You had one speaker in the middle of the dash, and that was it for the entire car. You didn't have subwoofers in the trunk and 15 separate drivers surrounding you, all strategically aimed to give you precise audio. You had an AM radio. If you were high speed, you had push buttons on that radio, and you had one speaker in the middle of the dash, and that was it.
Yep.
So you had all the traffic noise, you had the person next to you, you had the kids fighting in the back, and Jimi Hendrix is competing with all that crap. So yeah, you're going to miss stuff.
Right.
You know, it was
A
late
lot.
on in life when I started using headphones that I really started noticing those nuances that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like, I was in my 40s before I figured out the Chicago song 25 or 6 to 4.
Mhm.
There were two drum tracks.
Mm.
One on the left, one on the right, and they're both playing completely different things. They link up every once in a while, but they're doing completely different things. Now, I know it was all one drummer, but it was on two different takes, and they combined them in the mix to produce that bombastic sound that makes it even more bombastic than it actually was. It's completely different than some of their performances, like live at Tanglewood or something like that.
I can remember hearing that song out of one speaker in a car.
Yeah, me too.
I didn't care for that song for a long time until later when you get a chance to immerse in the actual recording. You're like, wow, this is really incredible. But when you're in that car with the mono speaker and you're 10 years old in the back, like, oh, this is horns
Yeah, horns. This ain't rock and roll with horns. Rock don't have no horns.
But the horns came across the most over that format.
Exactly, because it was in that tonal range.
You get the do.
The people from way back when were very the engineers were very astute, very they knew their discipline. If you ever listen to Nat King Cole, it's all mono, but if you ever listen to it, the quality of a Nat King Cole record, and in fact Frank Sinatra, but let's say Nat King Cole, it's so, and it's coming out of, it's mono, it's one speaker, and the quality is as if you wouldn't miss that it's not stereo. I was also impressed with that when I first heard that guy, because I like the jazz music as well. I like the big band music. I like the traditional American music. I kind of prefer it in many ways, to be honest with you.
Well, I damn sure do. I damn sure too. Give me a Creedence album and I'm a happy guy.
Well, I mean, like the
you're talking about Benny Goodman, like In the Mood, that kind of thing.
Right.
Glenn Miller and what have you?
Yeah.
Sure. That's one of the reasons why I like the Brian Setzer Orchestra so much, because it's got everything.
Right.
Yeah.
You got that.
Wild. They're wild. They were wild. They probably still are. They were awesome.
Who, Brian Setzer?
Yeah.
He had to back out for a little while.
The Stray Cats, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it started with the Stray Cats. It was Brian Setzer, Jim Phantom, and Slim Jim Phantom, and Lee Rocker. But Brian Setzer had to back out for a while, and he doesn't have any tour dates listed still for 2022. He has serious tinnitus, and he played a few gigs in 2021, but nothing yet so far in 2022.
Loud music is not pleasant when you have
he was wild.
You lose so much in your hearing, so
extremely talented guitarist, and I think one of the most underrated guitarists out there. Very good.
Most I don't want to call it underrated, but you guys tell me, pick an album that you think is is underrated that should be top notch from whatever era. I'm gonna say right now, the Violent Femmes, their album. What was it with? What was it, Dan? The album where the little girl is looking through
Girl
the
on the cover. Ah, shit. I can tell you in a second.
that album is acoustic. Mark, if you've never heard it, it's kind of like an acoustic, well done acoustic
That's self-titled.
Violent Femmes. It's an acoustic thing. It's like three of them or four of them at best, and they use brushes for the drums and stuff. And it's all kind of like some sort of, I don't want to call it punk, but it's got a little bit of like throw caution to. It's got a punk sensibility to it, but it's actually little encapsulated pop songs in a very acoustic. It's a great album. It's an underestimated album. Underground.
Underrated.
Yeah, underrated.
So many good songs on that too that
Yeah.
stand alone on the radio. They still play them all added
It-
up. And Blister in the Sun, they kind of got a resurgence in the 90s when the alternative thing hit, but they were earlier. They were like 80, it was like 84, 85 that album came out, because I remember getting it and going, Jesus, this came out like 8 years ago or something, or 9 years ago. When it was like 92, I was like, oh man, okay.
I remember when I bought it at the store. I bought it at the Midway Mall, and I even remember what it was against the wall. I even remember the wall and where exactly I went to get it and where it was sitting. I remember it like perfectly.
I think that album probably ranks up pretty high when you see top 100s and stuff. I think it's on there frequently.
Yeah, it's not an underestimated album. Or
Underrated.
Underrated.
Not at all. I mean, I'll say there's one that I missed out of the 90s that I didn't find until, maybe 5 or 6 years ago.
Bette Midler and her love song orchestra.
Don't be cracking on Bette Midler now.
That was the one. No, it was Neutral Milk Hotel.
Oh, I remember that one.
Airplane Over the Sea. That was a great freaking album. Like the whole album. It's kind of weird, and it's alternative, and it came out there in the 90s, and like for some reason it never made my radar, and I don't think it made a lot of people's radars. And then some years back I heard something about it on another radio program, and I'm like, who now? And I went back and listened to it. I'm like, this is really interesting. And it was really, it's one guy mostly. I mean, he had a band, but I can't remember his name either. And that was like his big album, and he did some more after that, but they never sort of reached the acclaim that this one does. But
yeah, that one came out good.
In retrospect, like lots of people go back to that now, and they're like, this is really amazing album, man. Lyrically and sort of the theme from front to back, and it was some of it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I had that album.
Yeah, that was a good one.
I bought that album thinking I'm gonna push my limits, because I really didn't, but I said screw it, and I enjoyed it. I ended up enjoying the hell out of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of sort of visual that gets implanted in you when you listen to that one. Like the words are really, it's very kind of poetic and non-linear in a lot of ways. Like it's just you're getting all these sort of imagery going in your head, and then it goes to something completely different, and some of it's dark, and some of it's kind of risque a little bit, I guess, and it's interesting. So that one for sure.
Yeah.
I can't think of others that were underrated and should be rated higher.
Soundtrack to the movie FM.
Okay.
It's a collection of a whole bunch of different performers, whole bunch of different artists, everybody from Linda Ronstadt to Jimmy Buffett to, Steely Dan. They did the title track, of course. And the only thing I have to base this on is the fact that out of all of the albums, cassettes, and I've owned it in album, cassette, and CD, And every single time I have bought that album, it's been stolen from me at a party or something like that.
Somebody grabs it.
Somebody snatches it and it's gone. And I've bought it at least 3 times in all 3 formats, and somebody has swiped it every time. So I gave up. And it's one of the first things I downloaded on iTunes. Other than that, Kenny Wayne Shepherd, Ledbetter Heights. It's just good music.
Not sure.
Ledbetter Heights.
I think it was his first album.
Ledbetter Heights.
What was his radio play? His big one.
Deja Voodoo, and then Blue on Black, and there was
Blue on Black. That was it.
that was like that was from the album Trouble Is, and that was like his 3rd or 4th album.
Yeah, 93, something like that. Yeah.
I got it set up here.
I don't know. I can't think of any others that I would throw on there that are, underrated. Because I don't know. I don't subscribe to rating systems.
Yeah, there were a few of them that got a lot of hate when they were released. Like, for instance, Into the Outdoor, Zeppelin Into the Outdoor.
Yeah.
Oh man, people hated on that album big time, but I loved it.
I liked it too. And
But that one where it's kind of like a carnival song.
Which one?
Or it's
most of it was written by John Bonham, or not John Bonham, John Paul Jones.
The one, so that album has a few of the hits, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's one song, I think it's the last one, that has the strange long name. That song, I mean, it's a brilliant song, to say that, but I don't like it. It's like I never liked it. It was just
the last song. Is it the Carousel Alhambra one?
I think that's the one.
I think it's like
Alhambra.
The last one's I'm Gonna Crawl, the last track. But yeah, that's In the Evening. That's a great fucking tune.
Yeah, and the evening's good, and All of My Love, and
Full in the Rain.
Yeah, it's a great album. I mean, you can't have.
But a lot of people hated on that album. It's kind of like a lot of people hated on Pink Floyd's Metal. They didn't like Metal. And the other Zeppelin album that got a lot of hate was Coda.
Coda I like too, actually. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't get it.
Dude, I don't know. I'm just of a different. I wasn't conscious when they were coming out. So in retrospect, they're all incredible. So
no. Yeah.
I don't get to look at them as a retrospect and
Well, I mean,
established. It's like, yeah, these are all brilliant.
Personal tastes are personal tastes, and you can't like every single thing that a performer's done.
No. I mean, there's tracks I'll skip for sure.
Yeah, but we got it all packaged, ready to serve up after the fact. We didn't have to wait for all those good bands were already sitting at the records
no, dude,
for us to explore.
Oh no, dude, I was waiting for it to come out because
no, I'm saying Dan and
no, okay, yeah.
As soon as I got into the Beatles or Led Zeppelin, I had the entire catalog ready to just freaking dive through because it's all there,
Yeah.
So we had a weird, if you look at it in those terms, but what's weird within the weird is that a lot of us, I would say a good chunk of us from back then in our era, I'm including Dan for obvious reasons because he's smack dab. We're part of the same era, literally part of the same era. We appreciated thoroughly the era's music, the previous era's music. There was a lot of appreciation of the coolness that was going on in those records. There was not a swooshing away or swatting away of the old. Right. And although the grunge was a thing, but it still didn't replace or anything to that effect. I mean,
and it didn't ask, that time we grew up, and nobody was telling you that your parents' music is shit. It was quite the opposite.
You didn't hear that.
No.
I sure did.
at that point, artists were going, no, man, I grew up with this and this and this, and I love it. And that's where my, like the grunge guys were all like, yeah, we listen to all these old bands, and so
I mean,
yeah.
oh yeah, we because I grew up in the 60s and 70s. So I remember Jimi Hendrix on Third Stone from the Sun talking trash about surf music.
I
That
don't know.
was your daddy's.
Is he talking trash about surf music? You've said this before.
Never to hear surf music
Is
again.
he lamenting never hearing surf music again, or is he
No.
saying he never wants?
Never to hear. Having never to. Let me pull up
No,
the
no, no, no,
lyric
no.
here.
No, I don't agree. I think he's lamenting the fact that he'll never hear surf music again. I don't think.
I don't think he was a fan. I don't think
again.
I don't think Hendrix was a, because in a few of his biographies or whatever, uh, they talk about him touring with the Monkees and they hit it off and this and that. But I think that, or was it the
Okay.
Doors? You know what? I can't say for sure. Let me just back off on that because
I've
I
got
can't
the
remember
lyrics.
exactly.
Okay. Although your world wonders me with your majestic and superior cackling hen, your people I do not understand. So to you I shall put an end, and you'll never hear surf music again. That's not a lament.
I'm still not sold. Is that the
But I
punishment
mean,
that you'll never hear surf music again, or is that a gift, or is that like, is that yeah? Is it like you idiots are into this surf music and I'm going to take it
well,
away?
yeah, there's a lot of that. There is a lot of that to it because it's all about. I mean, it's 2 paragraphs of lyrics, and it's all about an alien visitor.
Well, surf music also encompassed the
But
concept of
but
beach blanket bingo
but at the
culture.
time, even as it came out, there was a lot of pushback. There was a lot of hate for surf music,
Yeah,
even at the time. So, the Beach Boys were not seen as the musical geniuses they are looked at from 40 years later.
They
weren't
were but they were by the
by
right people in
by
terms of musicians.
in your opinion, but
No, no,
there
Beatles.
there was a certain segment of society that did like that. You're right,
No, no,
but
no, no. The
overall,
Beatles. Go ahead,
but
go ahead.
by that time the Beatles were passe as well to most people. Not everybody, obviously, but they weren't popular anymore because this was the later on the development. People were getting into King Crimson. They were getting into Emerson, Lake and Palmer. They were getting into Black Sabbath. The Beatles was your dad's music. She Loves You, yeah, yeah, yeah. Now the Beatles did push and explore, and don't get me wrong, Abbey Road was huge. I think just about everybody had that, and Sergeant Pepper. But it was only in retrospect that people went back to Revolver or Rubber Soul or things like that. They just weren't as big as the other stuff that was coming up. I mean, I can remember Woodstock, and remember, I grew up in San Francisco Bay Area in the 60s. We're talking Quicksilver. We're talking, oh my God, just the explosion, Jefferson Airplane, Santana. That's what was going on. The Beatles? Who listens to the Beatles anymore? So there was a lot of that was your dad's music. It was great while it lasted. But now check this out. There was still a lot of that going on at the time.
I just want to add this thing, so I understand that. I just wanted this thing. The Beatles referenced the Beach Boys
Mm-hmm.
as the highest inspiration for things such as Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts
Mm-hmm.
Club Band. So the people in that sphere recognized back then and this is on record. Now, this is not to speak of the population at large
That's what
necessarily,
I'm talking about, was the
because,
public at large.
well, I said the Beatles for that thing because you said it in your opinion. No, I was not making an opinion. I was making a statement of what had occurred between the Beatles, their inspiration, and the Beach Boys.
I get that.
But to your but to well, go ahead, go ahead. I was going to say something.
But what I was getting at was you guys were saying, well, we didn't get a lot of hate for the older music. And I'm like, oh, there was a lot when I was growing up because it was all seen as old fashioned, because it was a cultural revolution as well as a musical revolution. The guys weren't walking around with flat tops anymore. It was long hair, as long as you can grow it, you know. Oh, say, can you see my eyes? If you can, then my hair's too short. That type of a thing. It was no longer in the matching suits and beetle boots and the sign on the back of the car. It was sock it to me, baby, let it all hang out, tie dye, free love, and all that other good stuff. It was a cultural explosion that trashed everything from the previous generation. And surf music and all of that, Chubby Checker, and I'll put it to you this way: the closest anybody got to getting booed at Woodstock in 1969 was Sha Na Na, because they came out and did things at the Hop and a bunch of doo-wop music and people just didn't. They just didn't want that. It was just almost open rebellion against it, you know. So all of that stuff was being shoved back. Don't trust anybody over 35 years old. Freedom, and let's do what we want to do. And that was the cultural revolution that was the 60s. I mean,
Oh.
it was forget everything they did back then.
Oh, I had to go.
Go ahead.
Your surf music thing really bugs me, so I had to go look it up some more. There's an interview with Dick Dale about that.
Uh-huh.
About that.
Yeah.
And he says, I read that when Jimi Hendrix said, "You'll never hear surf music again," that was in reference to your battle with cancer. Is that true? And he says, you know what's so funny? Why they didn't say the rest of his sentence. Do you know what the rest of the sentence is? And he says, no, I have no idea what it is. What is it? So Dick Dale says, I never missed a gig in my life, and I had a temperature of 104, and I couldn't even talk, and I got hit real bad with rectal cancer. Jimmy was recording in the studio and said, I heard Dale did a no-show. That's not like him, you know. And his guitar player said, no, man, he's dying. And they had given him 3 months to live. Then Jimmy said, you'll never hear surf music again. And then he said, I bet that's a big lie. Let's pack it up, boys, and go home. And that was the full fucking sentence. So
There you go. Okay, so that's a little.
That's according to Dick Dale. So, you know,
Well,
that's according to him, yeah.
But that's also not the song lyric. So there's
Well,
a
no, you
difference
can see
in what he may have said versus, you know. But yeah,
No, but you can see the context there of where
I
he would have
can.
drawn that.
I can see. I
he
can
might,
see
he
that.
might have taken the same phrase and then, you know.
But it wasn't that just that line. That was just one
it
example.
into his other theme of the space alien song, and he
Right.
it into a different place. But I don't
Well,
think
I will say, I will say this. You know, when I used to play with my cousin, and he was straight out of the '60s and a musician from that time. When talking about, and he enjoyed, we played a lot of the '60s music in the studio, and we did a couple of gigs and stuff, but not much after that. When talking a lot about the '60s stuff, we got into the conversation of the Beatles, and he preferred the early Beatles because at one time I think I brought up something to the effect of Revolver, and he said to me, "Well, you know, back then we weren't too keen on Revolver." In his particular circles, they thought it was too disjointed, and it was too out there in a weird way. Like he didn't like that last song on the album, according to what he had said in that conversation, where it's got all the sound effects with the birds squeaking and whatnot. So he was more fond of the earlier Beatles than the psychedelic latter part of the Beatles, and whereas I liked all of it, but the psychedelic was pretty fun.
Right. But see, again, you were coming into it after the fact. You weren't living that evolution. Okay. So when the Beatles changed over from I Want to Hold Your Hand to Come Along for the Mystery Tour, you got that, not necessarily in chronological order. There were a lot of people that absolutely loved the old Beatles but didn't like the new stuff. There were a lot of people that liked the new Beatles but didn't like the old stuff because it's like, what, are you kidding me? You know, I want to hold your hand. Oh, how cute, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
But they weren't living the evolution of the music at the time. There was pushback in several directions. Now, these guys are going crazy out here in the chat, talking the Bay City Rollers. You're talking 75, 76. Same with Sean Cassidy. Partridge Family was like 70 and 71. The Osmonds, same thing. That was bubblegum pop geared toward 12-year-old girls, and it worked.
Good.
You know, especially the Bay City Rollers and Sean Cassidy. That was bubblegum pop. You know, that was in the 70s. And there's your 12-year-old girl target demographic right there. You know, so it was different things geared at different people. But being right there at ground zero as a kid growing up, 9 years old, you know, well, I was 8 years old. My exposure to Jimi Hendrix was on the Woodstock soundtrack album that came out in 1970, Star Spangled Banner. And I was captivated. I'd never heard of Jimi Hendrix before. So that was my only exposure to him, was what was on that Woodstock album. But you
Well,
can believe I went down and I started looking
let,
in.
let me say this:
Yeah.
it is an apparent thing that, from your vantage point, experiencing the music as it came out
Mm-hmm.
is a pretty different experience than people of our generation, where we had a back catalog to draw from,
Mm-hmm.
and it's almost like it's not. It is in a way, if you can stretch your imagination to it, but it's almost like, I don't know, archaeologists studying the pyramids.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't there for it, but they're
Right.
interested in finding out all there is to it, and all
Mm-hmm.
the stuff is there as long as they reach out and open the next, like, passageway or whatever. And so we did have the luxury of having it all laid out for us to explore, but we're not experiencing the evolution as it happened. So there is a
Right.
huge fundamental difference on that level,
Well,
right?
because when I listened to that, he started with a little bit of a jam, and then suddenly he went into the Star Spangled Banner. And the only thing that came to my mind was, how the hell does somebody do that with a guitar? How do you make those sounds come out of the guitar?
Oh yeah.
Nobody had ever heard anything like that before. It was also revolutionary. You know, it was all brand new,
But
and
you
it was.
guys back then, listening to it, lacked
Mhm.
so you had to take it all in and then look back after the fact, and then biographies are made, and like
Right.
listings of all the, where we had that access, although we missed the spring it on you one at a
Mhm.
time aspect. But we I kind of like that thing that I've because it's obviously what's happening, or what happened, and I kind of like thinking of it in terms of that, because we all did have to reflect back regardless, right? At some
Right.
yeah,
Right,
yeah, it's
right,
an interesting.
and I was much older before I figured out how he did all that, you know. But at the time, you had professional guitarists who had been playing for years who didn't know how he did that, you know. So, I mean, it was just something that was brand new, not only exciting but unexplored.
Right. But
So,
in a short matter of time after, you had
mhm,
professional guitarists emulating and doing
mhm,
very similar things. They're like, "Oh, Jesus, feedback. All right, I'm going to start playing with that and let me."
exactly.
Right, and did somebody else build another box, or this will do something?
Mhm.
Oh, wow, okay, yeah, we got that. All right, so yeah, I mean, it pushes it forward. But yeah, I can see that for sure. I mean,
Talking about underrated albums, just throw us in here real quick. Jim Dockrell says, first album I ever bought was Not Fragile by Bachman Turner Overdrive. Seriously underrated album.
Yeah.
Very good album. And I think the title song, Not Fragile, is probably my favorite Bachman Turner Overdrive song of all times.
Really?
Four Wheel Drive's not bad either, but I like Not Fragile the best. Very underrated album. And it was one of those albums that was everywhere. If you see the cover, you know exactly what album it is. And it was everywhere. That album cover was almost as ubiquitous as Dark Side of the Moon.
I don't think that I know that album.
Yeah,
It-
Bach saw blades.
Yeah, it's a big wooden crate full of gears and saw blades and stuff like that, and it's stenciled on it, Not Fragile.
Let me see if I've continued, and I'll look here to see if I
Right.
can find it.
That first cut, the title tune from the album, Not Fragile, sounds like nothing you've heard from Bachman Turner Overdrive on the radio. And I got that album and dropped the needle on side one and was hooked.
I've never listened to that album.
Me either.
Very good album.
Ready? Here it comes.
Oh, don't play it because
Yeah, we'll get copyright. Well,
What?
to be honest, it's been 2.5 hours. We should seriously think about landing the plane.
Probably. I was just gonna say I got a jet myself, so it's getting late here.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So, well, listen, we've had quite the musical journey. We hope you guys enjoyed it. We go live every Tuesday at 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific Coast here on YouTube, Trampled Underfoot Podcast on YouTube. Check out our website, same name, trampledunderfootpodcast.com. Catch our past episodes over there by pressing the Wayback Machine button. We have a site over on Facebook where you can drop us show suggestions and all that. And we're also sponsored by
Steve Nealon at Harneal Media. Let me say Steve Nealon and Company at Harneal Media. I say it that way because I don't know, does the other person want to be named yet? But we'll see about that. I'm still waiting for that ad copy, Steve. Now that I've gone completely off the rails, Steve Nealon at Harneal Media, your one-stop web solution. He is the man with the plan. He knows exactly what you need, whether it be create a web presence or increase your web presence. Creation of a web store for you to design and sell merch through a print-on-demand company. If you can think of what you need, Steve has got a solution for you. That's Harneal Media, HARNEAL media.com, sponsor of trampledunderfootpodcast.com.
All right. So listen, you guys be safe. Enjoy the rest of your week. We hope you enjoyed yourselves. We'll catch you next time, Tuesday, 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific, right here on our Trampled Underfoot podcast channel on YouTube. See ya.
Peace.
There.